Well, when you're talking about Universal Studios, the first thing that would come to mind for many people is Epic Universe, the brand new theme park that is opening on May 22nd. And from myself and many others, is getting rave reviews. But when it comes to the existing Universal parks, not everything is as hunky-dory, I guess you could say. And one of those attractions is Fast and Furious Supercharged. This one is known amongst the fan base as potentially the worst ride at Universal Studios. And it's one of the newer rides. Really, the question is, what is Universal going to do with this? As they have said, they have a slew of things coming to the existing parks, as well as the expansion pads for Epic Universe that they have plans for. So is getting rid of Supercharged one of the plans that they have? Is this going to happen? I don't know. I would like for that to happen, but we have a very interesting video from Attraction Ideas, which we have reacted to a few of their videos before. And I figure I haven't done one of these in a while. Haven't done a reaction for, I don't know, it's been a bit here. So figure let's watch through this and get some thoughts because I find this subject very interesting. As he says, Universal Orlando has a Fast and Furious Supercharged dilemma. So we're going to watch through this and give some thoughts on it. So hi, I'm Jared with Capture the Magic, and we will get going on this right here.
Fantastic, amazing, brilliant. These are all words that come to mind when you think of Fast and Furious Supercharged. If it was announced to be closing tomorrow.
Good point.
Yes, folks, it should come as no surprise that Fast and Furious Supercharged is indeed one of the most hated modern-day theme park attractions, quite literally anywhere. Ever since the ride opened back in 2018, fans have been begging Universal Orlando to hit the undo button and demolish this attraction for years now.
It's kind of wild that it is less than 10 years old, and it is, I mean, for people that go to Universal a lot, it is basically just an ongoing joke about this ride. And Universal themselves also knows that it's unpopular. I've talked about this before, but like last year, my wife and I got stopped to do one of those surveys. And in the survey, they asked, what is your least favorite Universal Studios ride? And before we can even answer, the guy goes, before Fast and Furious Supercharged, we know exactly where that stands. So they're even aware of where this ride stands. It would be hard not to be, considering how much it is really loathed. And yeah, it's very interesting. I don't know if I've ever seen a newer attraction be on at least the fans' chopping block as quickly as this one has. It's a very interesting thing.
However, with the ride now approaching 7 years of age, it's become abundantly clear that Universal has no intentions of doing that. They have no intentions of getting rid of this ride. In fact, it seems that...
I don't know if I would say... I mean, it's hard to know if they have no intentions of getting rid of it. I mean, again, it is a newer attraction, and Universal is not going to come out and say, at least at this point, we don't know what their future plans are. But it's not like they're going to come out and say, yeah, we're going to get rid of this. Like, eventually, at some point, they probably will. But again, it's still rather new. This is not something you typically run into with newer attractions, especially under 10 years old, that it's, needing to be redone again necessarily.
Universal is actually rather content to allow these complaints to fall on deaf ears. So with that in mind, the question of the day is Universal stupid? No, they're not stupid, folks. They're not stupid. In fact, the relationship between Universal and this ride is a lot more complicated than you might think. It's not quite as simple as this ride sucks and nobody likes it, therefore they should get rid of it. In fact, there's a lot more hinging on this attraction than you might expect. And believe it or not, despite the horrendous reputation this ride has, Universal actually kind of loves this ride. I know, insane to think.
This part where Vin Diesel is grabbing onto the helicopter, as ridiculous as the Fast and Furious franchise is, and it is ridiculous. Mind you, they started as street racers that were robbing semis to get, I believe it was DVD players or DVD player combos. Oh, I don't remember what it was. Anyway, they have graduated into essentially superheroes that none of them can get beat in a fight. I don't know if anybody knows this or not, but in the contracts like Vin Diesel, The Rock, and a lot of the actors, they have it in their contracts they can't lose a fight. So this is why they bring in new actors, because they can lose fights, and the studs, I guess you could say, of the movie, The Rock, Vin Diesel, maybe some of the women too. I don't really know if the women have that in their contracts, but I know some of them do, that they can't lose fights. But as ridiculous as this franchise is, this scene where he grabs a helicopter and does all this, first off, it looks like a video game, and second, it's just the most ridiculous thing you can imagine for a movie or a ride. It's so bad, it's kind of funny. It's like a campy movie in many ways. In some ways, I've kind of come to enjoy it for that.
Because quite frankly, this ride is so bad, it's so ugly, that not even a mother could love it. And yet somehow Universal is still harboring some sort of goodwill towards it. I mean, quite frankly, that's ridiculous to even think, because let's just not forget, this ride is not hated for some arbitrary reason. It's not hated because it's a Fast and Furious attraction or for some other superfluous reason. It is hated because, quite frankly, unequivocally, undeniably, it's bad. It sucks, okay? It's not a good ride from start to finish.
I would actually like to know how the process went of pitching this ride and then like them seeing the final product and then going, it's good, go for it. At some point, I would have loved to have known some guy or somebody somewhere was like, hey, this is really bad, right? And then they just got drowned out. They're like, no, it's just like the tram tour. And you're like, oh, okay, never mind. That's something I would love to know, of how this bad ride became from inception to being completed. And if there was anybody along the way that was just like, does anybody think this is ridiculous and a really bad ride? I hope somebody said something at some point. I don't know. Maybe they didn't.
Universal got the green light on this ride basically from the success of Skull Island Reign of Kong over in Islands of Adventure. When that opened in 2016, it did have mixed reviews, but it was largely well received by the general public and consistently got really high wait times straight out the gate. This proves something very important to Universal: the fact that they could take segments from their studio tram tour over in Hollywood and turn them into individual, independent, standalone attractions in Orlando. As Skull Island...
In theory, that makes a lot of sense, actually, from a business standpoint. I mean, taking something that's a proven commodity somewhere else and then making it its own ride, it's not a bad idea in terms of just overall, though.
Reign of Kong was originally King Kong 360 as a part of the studio tram tour. This would ultimately allow Universal to save a whole bunch of money by being able to copy and paste assets from the studio tram tour into new rides for Orlando, instead of having to go back to ground zero and start from scratch, building and developing these attractions from nothing. But in all fairness to Universal, when it came to Skull Island Reign of Kong, they knew that King Kong 360 didn't have enough meat on the bone to support its own attraction. So they added a whole bunch of features to the attraction. Of course, they added a highly detailed and immersive queue. They added...
I will say the queue of this ride, I'm not a big fan of this ride, of these concepts of the side screens when you're in these vehicles. So it's not something I really enjoyed much as a ride concept. But this queue is very, very well done. It's very underrated. That animatronic in there is fantastic. They used to have scare actors in this queue. So the queue is actually very, very well done. Lots of detail, lots of theming. Again, I'm not a huge fan of the ride. It's a better theme than Fast and Furious in terms of the queue, undoubtedly.
The section with the bats, they add the section with the insects, and they added, of course, the giant King Kong animatronic at the end of the ride. These things, alongside a number of other smaller things that they added to the attraction, ultimately allowed Skull Island Reign of Kong to really stand alone as an independent attraction and operate successfully without having to rely on the rest of the studio tram tour to sort of bolster the experience. So once that proved to be a success, Universal turned to the other screen-based portion of the tram tour, that being Fast and Furious Supercharged, a property that Universal has wanted to get in Universal Orlando for a long time. But when it came to building Fast and Furious Supercharged, Universal, they got bold, they got cocky. They thought that they could simply do no wrong. And they said, you know what? We added all of these bells and whistles to Skull Island Reign of Kong when we brought it over here, but quite frankly, did we need to do that? I think we spent more money than we needed to. Because when you look at Fast and Furious Supercharged, Universal made the grand decision to not add a single thing to the ride. That's right, folks. Universal did not add anything to the ride experience. If you're familiar with the Studio Tram Tour, Fast and Furious Supercharged as a ride experience is the exact same as it is on the Studio Tram Tour. Not a single thing of any sort of significance was added. Yes.
In their defense, I don't think Vin Diesel may be the most accommodating person and some of the actors to do additional scenes, perhaps. Because if you look in the pre-show, I'm pretty sure Ludacris is looks like a video game. I'm pretty sure he is like a computer animation. And a lot of the voice work in that pre-show is just bad. I don't even know if they filmed, like if they recorded their own things for it, if they just used dubbed over voices. I'm not really sure. Maybe that's something to do with it, or it could be them being arrogant. But it does make sense for them wanting to use Fast and Furious because it's a strange IP in that it makes a ton of money, at least historically they have. But for the most part, they make most of their money overseas. They don't make a ton of money domestically. But it is a property Universal owns, so it does make sense for them to want to include Fast and Furious in Orlando. It's just this ride is not good. Not the best way to do it, obviously.
There are different videos that play on the truck itself. Yes, there is this, of course, grand set that they created indoors that you pass by in 5 seconds and you don't get to really admire or see anything of. But other than that, the rest of the ride is an exact carbon copy of the experience on the Studio Tram Tour. And I mean, I could believe that this experience as a part of the Studio Tram Tour probably had good reception, right? The general public probably gave it praise because it was a part of a much grander experience. But if you isolate that experience and you put it alone as a standalone attraction, it does not work. It's extremely jarring, it's hard to keep up with what's going on, and it's over before you even know it. Not to mention that it also has some of the worst acting I've ever seen on any piece of media that's been put on screen before in my entire life.
You're under arrest right now.
Also, let me remind you what...
It's so true. It's so bad. And also the story of this ride, it's like your family, and you're going on a party bus to I think it's a warehouse, and it's supposed to keep you safe, but then these guys show up and you become part of the thing. So the story of it doesn't make any sense either, because it's like you're just on a party bus and you become part of this whole chase thing, and then the chase just goes completely bonkers. I feel like at some point they could have just pulled over the bus and then let them all fight it out. It's weird.
What the name of this attraction is? It's literally called Fast and Furious. Is this ride fast? No, it is not fast. You don't go fast at all. In fact, you're pretty much stopped in place for majority of it. And is it furious in the sense that it's like thrilling or intense? No, it's not thrilling or intense either. So, false advertising, anyone? But to be fair to Fast and Furious Supercharged, there were some good things it did. Of course, the queue is highly detailed. It's massive. There are a ton of hidden Easter eggs in here, more than maybe any queue at any theme park, quite frankly. So clearly, I mean, they went...
Yes, for that, the deep Fast and Furious lore for the 10 people that are going to pick those things out. There probably is lots of Easter eggs in here that would require a deep knowledge of these ridiculous movies that I don't have any interest personally checking out. I've seen most of them. Yeah, it's like a popcorn movie. You have to suspend your disbelief quite a bit to enjoy them, but they can be entertaining sometimes.
To the King Kong school of theme park queues. Clearly, right? They took that straight out of King Kong's playbook, but for some reason didn't go ahead and actually add a whole bunch of stuff to the ride experience to make it more worthwhile like they did with Kong. Well, the reason for that is because Universal thought that they could add more to the experience in a much cheaper and cost-efficient way. That way being by not adding stuff to the ride
You'll also notice here how Vin Diesel's higher than everybody, and then when Tyrese gets up on the truck, he sits down. I believe that's also in his contract in that he can't ever be overshadowed. And I even think when he fights The Rock in one of the movies, they do deliberate camera angles to make it not seem like he's shorter than The Rock. I don't know that to be 100% true, but knowing some of the contract stipulations, I wouldn't be surprised one bit. And the first time I remember seeing this, I was like, I'll bet you Vin Diesel had that in his contract where nobody can be taller than him in this scene. It's why he's standing up there and all this. So whether or not it's true or not, I like to believe my head canon, at least it is.
But by adding 2 pre-shows to this ride. 2 pre-shows, folks. There are very few rides that have 2 pre-shows. Escape from Gringotts has 2 pre-shows. I mean, Rise of Resistance has 3 pre-shows, right? But you have to really be a monumental experience to warrant more than 1 pre-show. I think it's already like kind of a high bar you have to be to actually even have a pre-show for your experience, quite frankly. And Fast and Furious Supercharged, of all rides, thought that it was worthy of not 1 pre-show, but 2.
Also, these pre-shows are cringy. Like, it's to the point where you feel embarrassed for the people that are doing it. And, like, they even play into inside jokes about how ridiculous this ride is. It's all I mean, from the queue to the ride, it's just not good. But it's so bad, it is kind of funny. Like, in a way, it's kind of a comedy ride if you just really lean into it and just how ridiculous it all is. So I think on that end, it's kind of enjoyable, but it's not your traditional type of theme park attraction where you're supposed to like believe that like you're in Gringotts when you're in Diagon Alley. This one, not so much.
Unbelievable. But the funniest part about these pre-shows is that not only are they not really entertaining at all, they're not funny, they're not interesting, they barely give you any information whatsoever, but the funny part is that the information they're trying to divulge in these two pre-shows were literally explained in like 15 seconds on the Studio Tran Tour. There's a video that plays right before you go into the tunnel that explains everything you need to know in about 15 seconds. And yet here, for Universal Orlando, they decided, no. The guests at Universal Orlando, they're not as smart as the guests at Universal Hollywood. They need 2 5-minute pre-shows to explain everything that's going on here. Because they just wouldn't understand if we gave them that same video clip. No way. No, there's no chance. Are you kidding me? So I have no idea.
See, this is the thing I'm talking about. I don't think that's a computer animated thing of ludicrous. It's odd. It stands out to me a lot in the pre-show. But I also think they did the pre-show like they did because their assumption may have been longer wait times than what this ended up getting, maybe. But from a story standpoint, I agree. It doesn't make any sense.
Why they decide to add in these 2 pre-shows, though I will say, probably the best part of the entire experience when you ride this ride is the pre-shows because you have 2 live actors in each of these pre-shows who tend to deliver the best comedic or entertaining moments throughout this entire ride experience because
Very true. They are the best parts of this ride.
Because at this point, like, they know the ride sucks. They know people don't like the ride. So they basically just make fun of the ride every single time that you are going through these pre-shows. So at least they make the experience fun. So thank God they're there. So clearly the ride was misjudged as being something that could just be pulled from the Studio Tran Tour and turned into its own attraction when it didn't have enough meat on the bone to warrant that or be capable of supporting that. And the ride was made on the cheap with next to nothing added to the experience to actually build it out and flesh it out for its own individual attraction. And the things that were added were, the most cheapest additions you could possibly add. And though I'm sure you probably don't just think this is just my opinion, just in case you were wondering, yes, indeed, Fast and Furious Supercharged has some of the lowest attendance of any ride, not only at Universal Studios Florida or Universal Orlando Resort in general, but also across all of the Orlando theme parks. It has some of the lowest attendance of any of those rides. Its wait time hovers around 20 minutes, which, mind you, is including those 2 pre-shows, which means the wait time is more or less walk-on most of the time. You're going to walk right up to that pre-show door, and by the time the next pre-show starts, they're going to let you right in.
And mind you, they shut this ride down last year for a couple of months during Halloween Horror Nights, and nobody cared. And it's not uncommon. I've been in the parks on a busy day when things are mostly over an hour wait, and I've seen this at 15 minutes, which, like he was saying, essentially it's a walk-on. Like, this is not an attraction that people go out of the way to do, and it's become very much, even people that don't go to Universal much, if they do any research, they'll go like, oh yeah, Supercharged is bad. Avoid it or write it as a joke, more or less, but it's not something you have to go to your way for.
That's usually how this thing plays out, even on the busiest days. Of course, that's because the ride is not good and the people who have already experienced it don't want to re-ride it, obviously, but it's also because even new people who have never experienced this ride, who are new to Universal Orlando, they don't want to check it out either because they know the ride has a bad reputation. They've heard it online. They've seen it from their friends and family who have told them since going that this ride sucks. It's not worth your time. And they're thinking, hey, if I got one day at this park, I'm not going to waste my time riding something that's probably not going to be very good. Meaning that the only poor suckers and fools who are riding this thing on a daily basis are people who are completely new to Universal and haven't done any research beforehand whatsoever, or are sadistic. That's just it. So why then?
It's got a good point.
If this is the case, and it's not just a case of opinions, it's not just a case of diehard fans not liking it, but the general public as a whole does not like this attraction, why then does Universal not do anything about it? Why is this attraction still standing? Why have they not gutted this thing from the inside out yet? Well,
he'll probably answer this, but I mean, realistically, if you look at it, it's less than 10 years old. They redid the Kid Zone. They added Minion Land. And then they also obviously were building Epic Universe. So there wasn't a ton of focus in the existing Universal Studios parks while that was going on. So it actually makes sense why it's still there. And again, you don't presume you're going to be replacing a 7-year-old ride that soon. So I think it just probably is a prioritized list, but he may go into some other reasons. But it does make sense if you just sit there and think about it from how theme parks typically operate.
Oh, I alluded to it earlier, folks. Universal loves this thing. Not because they like the ride. They know the ride sucks. Their own creatives will say the ride sucks.
My biggest mistake, I don't know if I'm allowed to say it, but I wish I had stopped senior management from building the Fast and Furious.
He looked so scared by saying that. Oh, that's funny.
But the reason why they love it is because it is the only representation of one of Universal's top film franchises in the Orlando theme parks. It's the only representation of Fast and Furious. This is a multi-billion-dollar grossing franchise for Universal. It is one of their top performing films at the box office on home video, no matter what metric you...
He's not wrong, and I said it earlier, but again, if you look at the worldwide box office on this compared to domestic, you will see where the majority of these movies make their money, and it's not in the U.S., which is probably some of the ire for this ride is people are aware of these movies. They're not, like, people here don't hold them in high acclaim, but they make most of their money overseas, and I think that's part of the issue with this ride.
Put it up against is one of their best performing films on a financial basis, period. And in an era where Universal is trying more than ever to leverage the popularity of their parks to promote their film business, as well as using the success of their films to promote the theme parks, it's more important than ever that Fast and Furious does have a major presence in these Universal parks. So if nothing else, for the simple fact that Fast and Furious is indeed one of Universal's most beloved and popular franchises that they've ever put to screen, is enough reason for Universal to fall on the sword and allow this absolutely abhorrent and hated ride to still exist in their parks 7 years later. And just to clarify, this is not a decision by Universal Parks or Universal Destinations and Experiences. No, this is the decision coming straight from the top at Comcast, who wants that brand synergy, and they want ultimately the studio business to benefit just as much from the theme parks as the theme parks do directly themselves.
Does make sense. But again, I would say if you're wanting to feature a franchise like this, having a better ride would make a lot more sense. It probably, if your whole goal is to people that haven't seen these movies ride this ride and think, oh, I'd like to see these movies, I don't think this ride does that. Nor if you're a fan of the movies and you ride this ride, I don't think it enhances your appreciation of the franchise. I would just say.
But here's the thing, Fast and Furious Supercharged is not providing the brand synergy that Comcast was looking for, because the ride is so hated at this point that it's not doing what you want it to do. It's not granting you that great brand synergy that you're hoping for, because the ride is so bad that people are walking off of this attraction not wanting to have anything to do with Fast and Furious for the rest of their lives. Like literally, they're...
Mind you, that could have also happened after seeing the movies, but he's not wrong in that.
Like, wow, that's what Fast and Furious is? That sucked. I don't want to see any of the movies. I don't want to see any of the new spin-offs that come out of this. I don't want to see anything related to Fast and Furious ever again in my life, because that was horrible. That is literally the reputation that ride is giving your most lucrative and popular film franchise. So I completely understand why Universal's been stuck between a rock and a hard place, wanting to please fans by getting rid of a ride that they don't like, but also trying to make the right business savvy decision by promoting one of your major films in your park. But as we just laid out, the fact that promotion is turning sour, the fact that promotion is actually making people not like that brand, not like that property, not have any interest in the film franchise, I think is starting to show that the scales are starting to tip in favor of this ride going away. As it's not just the bad reputation of this ride that's become a problem. The problem also is that this ride takes up a ton of space. Let's just not forget that Universal took out 2 attractions to put Fast and Furious Supercharged in this spot. They took out Disaster and they took out Beetlejuice Graveyard Review, a 2-for-1 special. And in fact...
And I love Disaster. I still would much rather ride Disaster than Fast and Furious Supercharged. I think most people probably feel that way, if I were to guess, though.
In doing so, they have since dedicated 2.6 acres to Fast and Furious Supercharged. To give you an idea of just how much space that is quite literally more than half of the entire space that DreamWorks Land takes up. That's crazy. I mean, this space holds so much potential. There's so many different kinds of attractions and big time attractions that Universal could put in this space that it's no longer even just an issue of this space having low attendance because the attraction in there is not attracting a lot of guests. It's also now an opportunity cost because the space and the building that it sits in is so huge, so massive that you could put in its place some of the most technologically advanced rides we've ever seen in history in that space that could be bringing in guests left and right, and yet you have one of the most hated rides in history taking up the space.
He may allude to this as he goes on. Like I said, I haven't seen this yet. I'm reacting to it in real time. But I do think that it is going to be replaced with something, and if we've seen the level of Epic Universe, I think we'll get something pretty good in here. I do. I don't think they're going to allow this ride to just sit here for another 5-10 years. I just don't see it at this point.
So between its bad reputation, the fact that it's actually hurting the popularity of the Fast and Furious brand, and the fact that it takes up a ton of lucrative land, I think that Universal and Comcast have sort of come to the realization that the writing's on the wall, that it's time to get rid of Fast and Furious Supercharged. I do think that knowing that there is going to be an influx of new guests to Universal as a whole after the opening of Epic Universe, they're going to want to hold on for dear life for a little bit longer after that, maybe give it one last hurrah to see if maybe it could turn the tides. But assuming that doesn't happen, which, I mean, let's be honest, that would be a miracle if that did happen.
Not to mention, Studios does need a lot more help. I mean, you look at Islands of Adventure, they've got Hagrid's, Velocicoaster, they've had some new additions in there that have been very, very well received. Studios is needing some help. And also, again, with Epic Universe, as great as that park is, and I've been to it, it's fantastic, but it does set a certain level of expectation from Universal guests that maybe have never been. So if they go to Epic Universe first, and then they go to the existing parks, there is a drop-off there from the terms of the immersion and the quality of attractions on some level. Obviously, Hagrid's and Velocicoaster, I'm not saying all the rides are bad, but a ride like this is going to stick out like a sore thumb, being just like, what is this? If you went to Epic Universe first, I would advise people go to the existing parks first and then go to Epic Universe like at the tail end of your trip, because that'll leave you on a high note. But if you go to Epic first and then the existing parks, you know, there are some great attractions, but some of these attractions are going to leave you scratching your head, one of which would be Supercharged, I do think.
I do think that in the next few years, we will be seeing Fast and Furious Supercharged bite the dust. But this still brings up another problem for Universal, as let's just not forget the whole reason why Fast and Furious Supercharged was brought to this park in the first place was to have that brand synergy with the studio division and get Fast and Furious promoted as a part of this park. Fast and Furious, yeah, maybe a little less popular than it was when Supercharged first opened in Orlando, but it still is a really popular franchise and it's still one of Universal's most lucrative. So there's no doubt about it that Universal's still going to want Fast and Furious in this park in some way, shape, or form. And of course, the leading rumor for this, at a time where it seems like it might make sense, is saying that Fast and Furious is going to go ahead and replace Hollywood Rip Ride Rocket. As we know, Rip Ride Rocket...
I wondered if he was going to get to this, because again, Hollywood's getting Fast and Furious, I forget what they're calling it out there, but they're getting the Fast and Furious coaster out there, and then they just got rid of their studio tram tour, the Fast and Furious part of that one. So the writing is on the wall for this attraction going away, given Hollywood's has gone away, and he may go into this, but the only issue with Rip Ride Rocket, it's in the New York area. I don't know if they will theme it to Fast and Furious. They could, but it's not a no-brainer that they would necessarily, even though I think Hollywood does give it some precedent that you could do this. But obviously, we'll have to wait and see.
Rocket is closing in September of 2025 and is ultimately looking for new suitors for its plot of land, which, mind you, is a very narrow strip, so we pretty much know it's money in the bank that's going to be a roller coaster taking its place. And with Fast and Furious getting a new roller coaster in Universal Studios Hollywood, that being Fast and Furious Hollywood Drift, the rumors have swirled that they're going to get a very similar version of this attraction in Orlando, in the place that Rip Ride Rocket used to sit. And though this is certainly possible, I tend to believe that Universal is eyeing up something that actually promotes and sells the Fast and Furious brand more than an unthemed outdoor roller coaster likely would. Again, remember, the whole point of putting Fast and Furious in this park is to sell the brand, is to sell the movies, is to sell the merchandise. An outdoor roller coaster that has a light Fast and Furious theme is ultimately not really going to do that for Universal. So I really do think that Universal may be looking at other options here. And in fact, maybe they aren't looking to replace Rip Ride Rocket with Fast and Furious.
I will just say I'm not a coaster person. Like, it goes upside down. It's not my thing. But that Fast and Furious coaster in Hollywood does look awesome. From the drifting and the turning and the spinning, kind of like a Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rewind. It's a cool concept, and in talking to the guys that are out in California that go out there a lot, they're super excited for this coaster. And I think if you're a coaster enthusiast, it'll probably be a good one.
With the idea being that instead, Fast and Furious would get a much more prominent presence in Universal Studios Florida. My idea being that it goes where Fear Factor Live and Men in Black Alien Attack are, instead creating a brand new land there. As let's be honest, folks, neither of these attractions are long for this world, as of course Fear Factor Live has been closed for years already now, and the building's just sitting there abandoned, only resuscitated once a year for Halloween Horror Nights. And then of course Men in Black is a ride that's over 20 years old. It's a property that's owned by their competitors Sony, and they have to pay licensing fees to them to have the ride in their park. And it's obviously not even a property that moves merchandise, because they don't even really sell Men in Black merchandise in the shop anymore. They just sell random stuff in the gift shop now. Clearly this ride is not long for this world whatsoever. So given the fact that these attractions just so happen to be located right next to each other, it makes for a perfect opportunity to put a new land in its place. And no, before you say anything, I'm not proposing a Fast and Furious land. That is stupid and dumb.
I was getting ready to say, I don't think Fast and Furious needs a whole land. Maybe in an Asia park, but again, given that this movie doesn't really make its money domestically, I don't even know if it's necessary to have a Fast and Furious representation in the parks. Now, I understand from Comcast's perspective, obviously it's a big franchise for them overall, so they would want that, but I don't know how much of a draw just Fast and Furious is for the domestic audience. I think it's more or less almost a joke at this point. Everybody talks about family and all that stuff in the movies. So to me, a stunt show would make a lot of sense. Now, you already have one in the Bourne Stunt-stacular. I think that's how you say that. But I think a stunt show with Fast and Furious would be fun, given very much like Waterworld out in Hollywood, in that movie didn't do well, but that stunt show is very well received. You could do something along the lines of that here as well.
Instead, I'm proposing a Tokyo land in Universal Studios Florida. After all, if you look at the lands of Universal Studios Florida, many of them are themed to major cities: Hollywood, New York, London. What better one to throw among the bunch than Tokyo? As not only would...
I'm just going to say now, I don't agree with this. I don't think studios is a place to put a destination themed land necessarily. To me, I think studios is much more ride the movies, be part of the movies. I'll hear him out, of course, but yeah, I don't know.
Tokyo bring about a whole new type of theming and infrastructure to this park that would make it really stand out as a land. But also, if we're talking about The Simpsons being replaced by Pokemon in the future, what better transition to have than going from Tokyo to Pokemon and vice versa? It is a perfect transition versus what is there currently.
Valid point. Obviously, Nintendo and Pokemon are very heavy from, Japanese culture. So that's not a bad point he just made.
But beyond that, I do think this actually would be the perfect setting for a Fast and Furious attraction. With the idea being that the central attraction, the e-ticket of the land, would be a Fast and Furious Tokyo Drift ride.
No. That movie's so bad. I mean, it would fit if they did a Tokyo Land, but I personally just don't want much more of Fast and Furious. But I will hear him out. But so far, I'm not on board with this idea. It's a good idea. It's an original idea, I will say. It's definitely something unique, but I don't know if it fits studios.
Which I know seems a little bit silly to suggest, given the fact that Tokyo Drift was the worst performing film in the franchise at the box office in its entire history.
It also doesn't star like Vin Diesel, like the major characters. It's mostly the side characters with I think Vin Diesel makes a cameo at the very end of that movie. It's been about 15 years since I've seen it, but it doesn't have the main people that I think Comcast would want to use to promote it. if the whole goal is to promote the franchise or making more movies out of this, yeah, I don't know.
So a little silly to propose that, but I do think that Tokyo Drift has been seen enough at this point to where it can be warranted to sort of be the basis and the setting of this attraction, as you have to consider that Tokyo Drift, of any of the movies in the franchise, might be one of the best at embodying what the series is really about, which is about racing cars, right? And driving them fast and furiously, right?
Valid point. Valid point.
Yeah. So what better attraction to make for a Fast and Furious ride than to go ahead and make a giant slot car attraction like Test Track or Radiator Springs over in California Adventure. Make Universal's version of that. Make it fast, make it furious, and involve some racing in the bunch, and also add in a drifting element. After all, this is in Tokyo. We gotta have the Tokyo Drift as a part of the ride. Not only would an attraction like this truly embody what a Fast and Furious experience should be, but it would do a great job of actually promoting the franchise and not only showing people what the franchise is about, where it's located, who the characters are, what the storylines are like, but it would actually do a good job of, getting people excited about it to actually go ahead and check out the franchise and the films that this ride is based on.
So I'm on board with the ride concept. I'm not on board with the Tokyo part. I'm not on board with the Tokyo Drift being part of it. I think you could do a Fast and Furious ride like this with the main Fast and Furious cast like that's in Supercharged. But the ride itself, if it's a great ride and it does something like the drifting element, it would work. Even if Fast and Furious isn't domestically the biggest thing, it would still give you, if you had a great ride, it would give you Fast and Furious representation in your park. But I'm not on board with the whole Japan Tokyo Drift thing. I don't think that, personally speaking, I don't think that would work, at least in my opinion.
With the pièce de résistance being the giant hill from Tokyo Drift, having that be the major outdoor set piece and landmark for this ride would be stunning. It would be absolutely stunning. Imagine where Men in Black Alien Attack sits right now, replace that building basically the same height with this hill, with cars driving down the side of it, with actual guests in it racing each other. What an amazing set piece that would be. What an amazing iconic landmark that could be seen from several different points in the park. I'm sorry, you can't convince me that's not a genius idea. Universal, take that one for free. But
it's not a bad idea, but again, you're talking about a franchise where I would like to know how many people probably have seen Tokyo Drift, and again, that is an older movie. I also just don't see them doing it off that movie, just given the age of it and like the lack of how well it performed. But I like the idea of this ride and even having a landmark and things like that. I like that part.
Let me also say that if Universal really wanted to go all in Fast and Furious, and for whatever reason they said, you know what, one ride is not enough, or maybe we don't want to put all of our eggs in one ride basket. Of course, we did that with Supercharged and it blew up in our face. Let's get a backup plan in. Well, hey, you got Fear Factor Live sitting empty and abandoned in this space as well. Why not go ahead and turn that into a Lights Motors action-esque Fast and Furious stunt show, right?
Agreed. I think this should be the thing it does. Completely agree with this.
That, again, would embody exactly what Fast and Furious is about, really sell the brand while also creating a really unique and fun and special stunt show, which, yes, Universal does have Bourne, and Bourne is really cool, but Bourne does not really take great advantage of vehicles or of grand sets. And that's something that Universal has done really well with in the past with Waterworld, and I don't think Universal Orlando really has their own version of Waterworld, and I think that something like Lights Motor Action in this park as a Fast and Furious stunt show would go a long way in delivering that really special sort of massive in scale stunt show that this park is really missing. Also,
we're on the same wavelength here with this. I made these points earlier, so I agree.
So a problem you might have been denoting with this plan is that if you go ahead and you get rid of Fear Factor Live, well, now you no longer have a stage to use for Halloween Horror Nights. Well, hey, if they went ahead and replaced Fear Factor Live with another show, you would still have the stage in the theater available for Halloween Horror Nights. So another plus in the direction of a stunt show. But folks, let's not get too carried away here, because let's not forget that the space between Fear Factor Live and Men in Black is about 8 acres in space. That is nothing to sneeze at. That's about the same space as the Lost Continent. You can fit like 4 Fast and Furious Supercharged into this space. It's a lot of land, undeniably. So does it really make sense to have 2 Fast and Furious attractions here? Probably not. I think just having the one Tokyo Drift attraction is probably okay. If you needed a little more land for that, you could probably go into the backstage areas here in the top right corner of the park. After all, a lot of these backstage areas are being moved over to Epic Universe, if not have already been moved over anyway, so that land very well may be up for grabs.
Valid point, and I've talked about this many times. Them moving a lot of these backstage areas to Epic Universe does free them up to use a lot of space that they previously couldn't in the parks to expand areas, and the new things they do, they could make it much bigger. So it is going to give them more flexibility in the future in studios, and I think at Islands of Adventure as well. I do believe some of that is or has been moved over to the Epic Universe area where a lot of the administrative buildings are and a lot more storage is over there.
An area that I have carved out here, that over 2 acres plot of land, that does not include the Halloween Horror Nights tents that I know people are like, you can't touch those, you can't move those. So hey, we're not even saying getting rid of those. Go ahead and put it into this plot of land here that may very well be up for grabs. Now, you don't have to expand into there, but I think if you did, it would open this land up a lot more to have it, have more depth. Obviously right now, when you think about the space between Fear Factor Live and Men in Black Alien Attack, it's just the one path, right? There's no depth to that area, right? You can't walk into it. Whereas if you expanded this land to fit in that extra 2 acres, you could probably have a section of this where you get to walk back into the land. Maybe you could put a restaurant in there, right? Japanese restaurant, or some shops or something else into that area that really sort of fleshes out the land and makes more use of the space. But as far as what else could be here, if we're not going to go ahead and build a second Fast and Furious attraction, what about Godzilla? All right, there's been a lot of talk about Godzilla, right? I mean, after all, his good old buddy, his partner in crime, is sitting over in the other park in King Kong, right? He's been waiting for Godzilla to come join him for decades now. Why doesn't he join the party? Well, Godzilla, of course, is not public domain like King Kong is, so Universal cannot use them for free. They have to go through Toho, who is a Japanese movie studio. Now, we talked about how Universal is big on brand synergy right now, so they don't really want to use third-party properties if they can help it. But Godzilla might be kind of an exception because Toho is not really a direct competitor of Universal. Yeah, sure, maybe in the Japanese market they are, but by and large, how about the worldwide box office? Toho and Universal do not really ever compete with each other directly. So Toho is a small enough competitor in the market where maybe Universal's okay with paying them for the theme park rights, especially in those theme park rights probably wouldn't be too terribly expensive. And you might be saying, how do you build a Godzilla attraction in the small space that Fear Factor Live takes up? Well, I'm thinking you don't build outward, you don't build on the ground, you build up into the sky, folks. And I'm thinking that Universal uses this opportunity to build their own sort of Tower of Terror, a ride that's themed to a Japanese skyscraper, and basically you come in, there's a pre-show that basically says, hey, we're gonna give you a tour of this brand new skyscraper, only for Godzilla to start attacking the city. You hop into the elevator to try and get high ground for some reason. I didn't say it had to make perfect sense, but hey, you hop in an elevator because you gotta go ahead and get to high ground to escape Godzilla, only for Godzilla to start attacking the skyscraper while you're in the elevator. Boom, it's genius, it writes itself. Take it, Universal, please, run with it. And let me just clarify.
Actually, a pretty cool idea. I mean, Godzilla is a property that there's been more movies lately about it. I don't know if I don't know about the draw of it, but that ride idea is not a bad one, I will say. I mean, he's got some good ideas to do a Tokyo Land. I just don't think personally it fits studios, but it's not a bad idea.
Though, of course, most of this would be executed using screens, I do think there is enough space here where you could have a section at the end of this ride that features a full-scale, neck-up Godzilla animatronic that would really hit home, take a play right out of King Kong's playbook, and end this ride on a high note. And you know what? If you're not interested in that, again, we are dealing with Tokyo here. Another possibility is to run with an anime property or run with a bunch of anime properties and put some sort of attraction theme to anime in.
Anime is insanely popular. It's not something I'm really into, but it has gotten a lot more popular in the last few years as well. That's not a bad idea. I don't know if they would take a risk on it necessarily, because I don't know about the overall appeal of it, but it'd be an interesting idea.
In this spot, I literally get comments on almost every single video I post for like the last 5 years of people saying Universal should add anime to this park. And I always kind of think to myself, like, that's just never going to happen, because where would they put an anime property in this park where it would make sense? hey, if they built a Tokyo Land, that's a perfect opportunity to get anime in here. And we know there are a lot of anime fans here in the United States, so perhaps that could be an audience that Universal could really sort of tap into should they want to. And a lot of those properties, they already have the rights to for theme parks through Universal Studios Japan, which tends to use those properties quite a lot. So, hey, it's an idea. But even if you didn't want to use any of those properties, there still are plenty of other ones that maybe even Universal owns themselves that could easily enough take place in Japan, or maybe already do take place in Japan, making it an ideal setting to go ahead and build in this park. But regardless of what my ideas are for Fast and Furious, the question still remains, what is the future of Fast and Furious in this park going to look like? Is it supercharged? Is it a new ride? Is it a new land? These are all questions we're waiting to have answered.
All right. I mean, overall, I completely agree. Fast and Furious Supercharged is a terrible ride. I do think it's on its last legs, and I don't think it makes it a decade before it's replaced. I'm not going to be surprised one bit if what Universal said they follow through with, which I think they undoubtedly will, is that there is a slew of things planned for the existing parks. Probably a lot of that in the studio side, because again, Islands of Adventure has gotten Hagrid's and Velocicoaster over the past few years. So Studios is needing some things. And I think Fast and Furious makes a lot of sense to replace that and put in something that will actually move people through it, because currently it's not helping with park capacity. And if you're looking at more people coming into the parks because of Epic Universe, you want rides that people are going to want to ride, that are going to eat up crowds. And Fast and Furious Supercharged does not do that. So it could go, if they want to keep Fast and Furious representation in the parks, which I, again, would argue, I don't know how, I don't think domestically it has a lot of appeal, but it does make sense from, if Comcast wants to, because it's one of their bigger IPs that they own. That does make a lot of sense. I don't think replacing Rip Ride Rocket works because, again, it's in New York. So I don't know necessarily. You could make a story where that works. But I think a stunt show would be great. And that whole drift ride, kind of like a test track, is a really good idea. Now, I'm not sold on the Tokyo thing. It's an interesting concept, and there are things you could do with that. I just don't think that fits into Studios as much. But there is a lot of space that they can utilize by taking out some of these attractions. I do think Simpsons is on the chopping block. I think Men in Black probably is as well, given from what I've heard. Pokemon coming in likely would take over Men in Black as well. Pokemon's a massive franchise. Again, Nintendo related. I think that would be a huge draw for people. And I think Supercharged is definitely on the chopping block. So those areas of the park I think are the most, I would say, ripe for the picking in terms of doing something different with those. There's other areas as well that you could choose from, but I think those areas are the ones I would say are the ones that are more than likely going to get something announced replacing all those something very soon. From what I've heard, the Pokemon thing is essentially a go because they're not going to renew the contract with The Simpsons, and they may even end that contract early. And I think they're going to want to get more Nintendo properties in, because I think you're going to find, and I think the wait time to proving this, that Super Nintendo World is going to be the most popular land in Epic Universe, just given the overall appeal of Nintendo across generations, kids, adults, everybody in between, and bringing that into the existing parks like they've done with the Wizarding World, where you have multiple, you have this IP and it's in all the parks represented. I think is another thing that they will do with Nintendo very likely. I don't personally think Fast and Furious needs to be in the park, but it probably will be. So you could just get a really good attraction, slap the name on it, maybe play into the corniness a little bit, kind of like they currently do. I think that would be pretty fun to do it that way. And again, you probably want to maintain the original cast or the main cast in these movies and not go Tokyo Drift version. But I think ultimately Fast and Furious Supercharged is going to be gone, and I think nobody's going to shed a tear about it. And hopefully, in that big of space, they could put something really, really good in there. I don't know if they would replace it with another Fast and Furious, likely something different. But we'll have to wait and see. But overall, I like doing these sometimes just because what's coming or what could be coming is kind of fun to debate and talk about, and not just, what's going on in the parks currently. And sometimes, the Attraction Ideas, it's a great channel. Go subscribe over there. He has a lot of cool ideas on a lot of these topics. So go check him out. And I think ultimately we all can agree that Fast and Furious should be gone. Hopefully it is very soon. But we will find out, I think, sometime very soon. After Epic Universe opens, I think there is going to be some announcements coming rather quickly. As we know, Rip Ride Rocket's going away in September. You likely could see more announcements around that time period as well. But either way, that's going to be it, though, for this video. If you like this video, please like it and subscribe to the channel, as we do lots of coverage here of Universal Studios, Epic Universe, Disney World, and pop culture. And let us know in the comments, what do you think about Fast and Furious Supercharged? And do you think it'll have a representation in the parks if they remove this attraction? And until next time, we will see you in the parks.